Hello, welcome back. It is week 192 on Out on That Line podcast. I'm Jeff with my co-host Alex. As always, Alex, how you doing this week?
Oh, Jeff, please excuse me. I think I dropped my monkey. I am doing great, Jeff. How about you?
I'm doing well. They land on their feet pretty good, I heard. So
Yeah.
it should be just fine.
One of the funnier lines in Beer Fest. I have no idea. It's just, I think I dropped my monkey.
Yeah, what a golden age of comedy movies. Like there was
100%.
nothing dumb enough, you know.
Nothing too dumb. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everything was fair game.
It's good to have a few brain off moments now and again, and that era of comedy movies certainly gave us a few.
Absolutely. You and I walked out of The 40-Year-Old Virgin changed men.
Yes, that and Wedding Crashers.
Yes. Grab that net and catch that beautiful butterfly.
Yeah, both the comedy and Rachel McAdams in that
Incredible.
movie.
Incredible days.
Yeah. What a time. What a time. Well,
Salad
this week we are going to come back hot. We're going to talk about Hayley Williams and her new album, Ego Death at a Bachelorette Party. If you folks were wondering, yes, this song does contain references to an ego death. She was not just kidding. It's not just a clever emo title of a song or an album like some folks were wont to do. This was a very different experience versus her last solo album, which we also did on this show. Always been a Paramore fan, generally a Hayley Williams fan, both like the music she's made, and she kind of seems like she stands on business for certain causes that I tend to agree with. And I was just overall not skeptical about this album, but just curious about what this was going to be. I was wondering if she was going to continue with that kind of lower, like almost lo-fi, like acoustic style, the real like kind of bedroom pop sort of thing. And there certainly was some of that, but I felt like this was kind of a bridge between Paramore Hayley Williams and that like acoustic album Hayley Williams.
Yeah, I will 100% co-sign that. I was thinking that as you were about to say it. It's very, very interesting coming off the heels of that last album. So first of all, you look at something like Paramore, and I agree. I love Paramore. Paramore has withstood the test of time.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the pop punk that's out there in the world does not hold up. I went to see Jimmy Eat World a couple years ago. That shit holds up. They also kind of like transcend the pop punk label, but neither here nor there. But some pop punk stuff, some of the stuff from like the early 2000s really does not hold up. Paramore does not have that problem. So it's not cringy. It doesn't really lose its bite. And then you get something like, I believe it was 2021, and Descantos, Flowers for Vases, I believe is the full name of the album. I remember us not liking that one. I certainly didn't. I was like, this is just like so dour and too stripped back. And again, I'm not like pander to my sensibilities as a Paramore enthusiast and give me more of what I want.
Yeah.
It was just too much of a tonal shift that tended to like wallow a little too much in the introspection. Where this one gives us a different flavor is it's raw. It's honest. It's not like she was getting a lot of big feelings out, and that's great. It just wasn't particularly a fun listen. This is where you start to get the sense of humor. You start to get like more in touch with the raw emotions behind the story. And the story is fascinating too. And we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So what did you think?
So I really I definitely have softened on my stance of the first album, because I think I just categorize all of those albums like that. They were just all COVID albums. These were people that were just cooped up for way too long, had a lot of feelings they wanted to get out. And I think you ended up with a lot of very interesting, I think we'll look back on that time period, and I think we'll consider those to be very interesting albums, because a lot of them were big departures from what those artists like kind of typically did. And I think the only version of Hayley Williams that you'd really heard was maybe a couple of features like Airplanes, that B.O.B. song, like a lot of people heard that one of the most played pop songs of those couple of years. And then the Paramore albums, and but those were like, I wouldn't say like heavy albums, but, harder rock, pop punk, like that kind of thing. Had a lot of energy to it and a lot of like anger and kind of rawness to it, like you'd expect from punk music. So hearing the Flowers for Vases album, it really was a huge step back from that, as far as like the style, as far as the kind of production. I don't want to say production quality because it's not like that was bad or anything on the Vases album, but just the amount of stuff going on. It was just very basic, and it did showcase Hayley Williams' voice very well. I think that type of songwriting maybe isn't a strength of hers. I think she has a huge knack and a huge talent for writing big hooky songs. I think that's part of what makes Paramore so popular, and there was a lot more of that on this album. And I do want to draw your attention specifically, Alex, to the co-writer, one that received co-writing credits on the song Discovery Channel, Mr. James Frank. Are you familiar?
Oh, Jim. I wish we could do that whole skit.
Yeah.
Hello, Mother Dear. Obviously, Bloodhound Gang fame, gang.
Yeah, I really, typically when I listen to the album, when we do these for the show for the first time, I just listen through. I don't really pay attention to the song names or really anything like that. I might kind of note something if it's particularly moving one way or the other, whether I really love it or really hate it. But other than that, like, I get more into the specifics of the album on like the kind of subsequent listens. The first one is just like, give me the vibe. Let me just listen to this album and kind of get it all in at once before I start picking it apart. When I heard the chorus to the song Discovery Channel, it sounded very familiar to me, obviously. Big Bloodhound Gang fan back in 8th grade. Let me tell you what, buddy, that Hooray for Boobies album, life-changing. Probably my parents probably hated hearing that when I would play it way too loud on the stereos in my house.
Yeah.
But really fantastic album. And I still contend to this day that if Bloodhound Gang decided to take themselves seriously and try to write some serious songs, they probably would have been a great band. You can't write songs that funny and that clever and like that catchy without knowing how to write a good song. You know what I mean? So it's funny that Hayley Williams used probably their most famous song from the Bad Touch for this chorus. Just really unexpected, very appreciated turn of events as I went through this album.
And I would call it unexpected swing and a miss, because you see Discovery Channel, my mind didn't immediately go to Bloodhound Gang because the song's called The Bad Touch. And folks, as a sidebar, I do a mean version of that song. Let me tell you something, brother. I was in a 90s cover band for a hot second and a cup of coffee, and we did The Bad Touch. It was usually a set one ender. And let me tell you something, while the fellas were jamming, I was dancing. I was a dancer, Bob. So I know that song. So unfortunately, the blatant rip, like the chorus is word for word.
Yeah, it is.
Note for note, you and me, baby. So just like a large appropriation of that song that just did not come off for me. She didn't pull it off on that one for me, unfortunately.
I think just like trying to give the original The Bad Touch any sort of like real songwriting critique, I think you're going to swing. I think you're missing the point, right? But I do think using this song on this album, while there was a lot of tongue-in-cheek lyrics and kind of a lot of sense of humor throughout this album, this was a different kind. This was just felt shoehorned in there, really. And I think it should be considered separately from the rest of the album to try to give it a little bit more credit.
Well, and that's actually the interesting thing. You talk about separately. The way that these songs were released is interesting. She just released she just opened the floodgates on all of them at once. Mm-hmm. And people kind of had a chance to go through and ostensibly slapped it onto playlists in whatever order and listen to it that way. So she kind of gave fans the tools to design their own version of the album. Mm-hmm. And there may be versions out there that work a little more cohesively than this one. At times, this does feel like a playlist and not like a definitive album. That's not necessarily working against it. It's just kind of a take on it, because there are some songs, it's a solid hour. That's
what I was going to say. I think it works against it when you start touching that like hour-long album mark.
I think, you snip 2 or 3 of these out, and then you've probably got like the perfect amount, and then play with the order a little bit. It was again disjointed, but not in a bad way. Mm-hmm. I actually kind of liked it, where it was like, "Oh, you like this? How about I serve up this to you?" Sabrina Carpenter kind of does the same thing. I haven't listened to the new album yet, but in Short and Sweet, it was kind of like, "How would you like a little bit of country?" And a Dolly produced tune, and you're like, "Oh, maroon." So that's always like fun. That's a strength when people do that. And I especially love that, like, you talked about bridging the gap from Flowers for Vases and like classic Paramore. And most of these songs exist in that pocket,
Yeah.
and put a little twist on it. You get your indie pop, your dream pop, like straight up pop, revisiting the pop punk roots, like the sound kind of returns to that early 2000s
Mm-hmm.
aesthetic. And again, it works. It's not corny. It's like Paramore as a whole. You can go back to it. You don't feel bad about yourself. It's not cringe.
Yeah.
And really great production across this whole thing, I thought.
Yeah.
All these songs, like, individually work, and then they had like a cohesive sound. So maybe not necessarily like the music fitting together perfectly, but whoever mixed it, mastered it, put it together, it sounds great.
Yeah, it was definitely, I felt like it had a much more like pop oriented sound versus like a pop punk oriented sound, so I think
100%.
emphasis on different parts of different instrumentation and stuff like that, not as heavy on like the drum and bass and that kind of stuff, not in the same way that like a rock band would play, but there was a lot of drum and bass on this album. There was a lot of like synthetic production, I guess is what I'll say on this. I think where she did tap into the kind of Paramore things is the song Mirtazapine. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. And then also the last part of like I Won't Quit on You, the way that song ends, I think, if I'm thinking of the right, yeah. And so there were definitely little moments where it's like you remember that she was a rock and roll singer, and I think this album really displayed a lot of versatility, because there is, what is it, the second song in the album there, so there's parts of it where she's kind of singing in her normal clean tones, but behind it there's a very distorted yelling and wailing of other lyrics going on. It's kind of a background thing. They're almost doing like she's almost doing like a melody with herself, like a screamo band would do, where you have one guy singing like the sweet lyrics and the other guy just screaming his lungs out in the background. So there was definitely elements like that where she put it in a kind of pop like coating and kind of a pop package, but there was a lot of those elements I was used to hearing on those like late 90s, early 2000s bands from like Fueled by Ramen, and all these like pop punk like labels like Epitaph and labels like that. I think it's good that she tapped into that, but it's good that she evolved past it too, because I think it could have very easily gone into almost like a Paramore rehash, where she was like, oh, these are all the kind of things I wanted to do myself, but I was in a band, so I'm just going to do it myself now. I think there was always a danger of that happening, but she kept this, it's very separate from Paramore. I don't think this encroaches at all on what they do, other than you hear the things they have in common because they have her in common, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. And I think when you say like it's not necessarily that like, oh, well, I was in Paramore and that was holding me back from doing my own stuff. It's not the case of Paramore holding her back or her thinking that. Really what it is the liberation, first self-produced one. It's the liberation from her record label. Do you know about the crazy deal she signed when she was like 15?
I'm sure you have the details, but I can imagine it was bad.
It is one of the most predatory things I think I've ever heard of in my life. So with streaming services kind of dinging revenue, the record labels came up with what's called a 360 deal, which entitles you to a piece of merchandising, touring. Basically, every single aspect of you is monetized, and the label's got its finger in the kitty. And I think and not just that. That's not just like, yeah, to a 3-year deal. It was a 20-year 360 deal. She was locked into that crazy deal for 20 years. And as soon as it was up, she went out and did her own thing. And I think based on that alone, I would call this a triumph. Like, even if I like didn't really like this album that much, I would be like, it's a triumph purely because it's an artist taking it all back. Like, yes, it sucks that Taylor Swift has to keep remaking the same album, but I assure you it doesn't suck for anyone more than people who don't like Taylor Swift. But this was like a total reclamation of your ability to make music, to put out the kind of stuff you want to do, total autonomy, and no one's getting a piece of this but you. And I think that freedom echoes through this because it's raw. Raw doesn't mean like crude. It just means blunt force. And there are times on the album where it's angry, and times where it's unsure, and times where it's got a bad case of the sillies. Like, there are a lot of different moods to it, but they're all raw. They're right there. She's talking candidly. I mean, in the first song, thinking about all the idiots I made rich. And that's basically like, she neither dwells on the topic nor just glosses over it. She comes back to it as a source of fuel in a lot of these songs. And it's not a victory lap, it's a new beginning. And a lot of the songs to me represent that. They feel fresh. They feel like a good direction for her. Is it reinventing the wheel? No, but it is reinventing Hayley Williams to a satisfying degree, like 25%. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's adding another aspect of hers that you can enjoy. You know what I mean? I think it's another version of it that you can enjoy. I think she could probably sing whatever genre she wanted to. Not that she's like the crazy most talented 8-octave range kind of singer or anything like that, but she does have the blessing of a very like appealing sounding voice and the ability to sing over really pretty heavy sounding rock and roll, regular old acoustic music, or this kind of mashup of the two, this kind of like synth driven, electronic driven, just like get in the studio and just make something that you like. I think I would be very interested to see what direction she wants to take her career. Like, is there going to continue to be a focus on Paramore? Because I think now that she's got all the freedom in the world, that they might do something crazy. Because I mean, they were always a pretty talented band. I don't know if I know they've been touring recently, but I don't know if they're interested in making new music or anything like that, or if she wants to just take that herself. But I'd be very interested now, because it's clearly, if she was fully in charge of like kind of everything that went on with this album. And while I think obviously you could have shortened this up, I think there's an easy 15 minutes you could find on this album that you could tighten it up a little bit. But again, it wasn't me that needed to get all this out. So I think with something like this, because there's so many different like parts to it, this is one you can easily chop up. Just listen to the ones you like. I'll probably go back to Mirtazapine. Like, that was a great song. Like, it was a great pop punk song. And there's a lot of these that I probably won't go back to that much. But it's not because I didn't really like them. It's just like there's a lot of music out there. I'd rather listen to like kind of the heavier side of things if I can, of the stuff that she's putting out. But to me, this was, like you said, this was a really strong step. Like, if this is what she's going to do and she's fully in charge of kind of all that goes on with it, very impressed.
Yeah. And I tell you what, some of the stuff that worked the best on this album was the synth stuff. If she were to steer into synthwave with Paramore, you get kind of a Turnstile type operation in a way.
Yeah.
Like, if you can take pop punk heaviness and bring it forward with this, I don't know, I guess I'll call it like even though they're not Gen Z, there's a Gen Z attitude to kind of a more like, I think Turnstile resonates with Gen Z because it's not quite as get hyped up for the football game as pop punk could be a lot of the time. So like Turnstile sits in a sweet spot between punk, rock, synth. It's like the perfect combination. I think you could do a really kind of hyped up, aggressive version of it with Paramore, and it would be really satisfying, because the synth stuff on like Glum worked really well on this album, I thought. A lot of directions. Or she can just keep making these kind of mixtapey type things whenever she's just like, collection of songs released. Jerry Garcia did that and still did shit with Grateful Dead. So it's like, I think there's this music still feels new and it still feels vigorous, and Hayley Williams still feels vigorous. Like, she's got a lot left to say. So that made it a very satisfying listen in and of itself.
Yeah. I think for me overall, this one's going to be a strong stream it. I think it's going to be, I encourage you to stream it. If you're already a Paramore and Hayley Williams fan, you're kind of a completionist collector, go ahead and buy the vinyl. I think it's probably going to be a double with the amount of songs that are on this. So it's probably going to be like $40. But I think if this is the type of music or if you're just generally a pop music fan, like if you really like the kind of stuff that like Sabrina Carpenter and kind of that ilk has been putting out recently, a lot of which has been very, very good. I think you'll find a lot in this album that you like. I think it's nice to hear Hayley Williams go so many different directions with still making it sound like her. You know, I think the vocal layering is pretty masterfully done kind of throughout this whole album, which, you know, something I forgot to mention earlier, but you mentioned the production. That specifically for me is one of those things that just makes this something, again, that I encourage people to go and stream and listen to.
I will back your strong stream it. Absolutely. The reason it doesn't reach buy it status for me personally is on a certain level, it is a little basic. I think it's within its own logic, all of its successes are incredibly successful. It's like we talked about New Day after this crazy deal, solo effort, as compared to the Divorce album in 2021, Flowers for Vases. So as like an evolution from that, as a new stage after this deal, it comes together very successfully and it's enjoyable. It's just for me kind of a genre that doesn't have a ton of immediate re-listenability. I'll never kick it out of bed for eating crackers, but it's not quite, you know, GOAT status for me. Not that like to be a buy it, you have to be, you know, something I've never heard before. But I have heard this before. And I heard it here done very successfully. So strongly encourage the stream it. Strong stream. It's a strong stream, baby.
I think a lot of people are going to find songs on this album that they're going to like. But where else will they be able to find the episode on the other Hayley Williams album that we did?
Well, I predict you're going to find a lot to enjoy at youtube.com/C/out on that line. Folks, it's powerful strong here, powerful hot over here in the great state of Maine. And I tell you what, I'm just boasting with enthusiasm about what we got going on at our channel down here in Maine. You ever see that skit, Maine Justice, on Saturday
No,
Night
but
Live?
I feel like I was getting a little Buford Butterfield
A little
action
bit
there.
That's a spicy jambalaya. It's great. It's a great skit. I don't think I can sustain the bit. So, folks, I'll get a bad case of the sillies. Sometimes I get a bad case of the sillies. Sometimes Jeff gets a big old becots. You know what I'm saying? Bad case of the sillies. Sometimes we can be very serious and insightful, and sometimes we're just damn delightful. That rhymed. It was intentional. I worked on it all week. Or did I? You won't know until you come get a basis for what there is to expect and enjoy at youtube.com/C/out on that line. We've got the podcast, we've got reactions, we've got the single series on the record. Who knows what's coming out next? We certainly don't. We have no idea. So, you know, make sure you click the thumbs up to like the video. Click the bell so you get notifications. Subscribe. That's probably the first thing you should do is subscribe. Trickle down to notifications so you get a notification when we make new stuff, and the thumbs up to say, nice job, fellas. Well done. But we'll take your verbal affirmation in the form of a comment. It's great for the algorithm. It's great for the channel. It's great for our self-esteem. So wade on in with your fellow man and let us know what you thought about this episode and more. What other kind of shit do you want to see now that we can fucking swear in YouTube videos all we fucking want at youtube.com/C/out on that line.
That's brought to you by Freedom of Speech. Till next time.